Hello, and welcome to Everyday Simple Somatics, a podcast dedicated to helping you find healing through your body's natural wisdom. I'm Dr. Christine Baker, and I'll be your host. Okay, so imagine this. You have been waiting all week for this moment, this window of time with no to-do list in it, nothing urgent. The kids are occupied. You are technically done. You sit down on the couch. Maybe you have a nice cup of tea or coffee with you. And so that moment is here of rest. But instead of feeling relief, your body fills up with restlessness. Maybe your mind starts racing through everything you forgot to do. Maybe there's this low hum of anxiety without even a clear source. Maybe sitting still just feels somehow wrong, almost like there's guilt, like I should be doing something else or doing more. Or maybe you took it even 2 steps further and you are trying to rest in a big way, like a 45-minute meditation or something like this. And you've gotten the app and you're listening to the meditation and you're on your special pillow and all the things. And within a minute, you feel like you want to crawl out of your skin. That kind of restlessness is not a personality trait. It is a protective response. And there's a very good reason that it's there. It's not that you're bad at relaxing, or I'm just high strung, or I'm someone who thrives on busyness. Side note, these are all things I've said in the past myself, so you are also not alone. Your nervous system learned at some point that rest was not safe. And it's doing exactly what it was trained to do, which is to keep you moving, keep you producing, keep you vigilant, because somewhere in your history, stopping felt like danger. And so today we're going to talk about why this happens, what is actually going on in your nervous system when stillness feels like a threat. And then I will walk you through a 3-part somatic practice to help your body find rest in a gentle, titrated way. So for those of you that are new here, I'm Dr. Christine Baker. I am a licensed professional counselor with 13 years of experience working in the field of trauma recovery. I am also a somatic experiencing practitioner, which just means that I'm a person that believes strongly that trauma does not just impact our emotions and our memories, but it is also stored in our bodies, specifically our nervous systems. And if we believe that, then we've got to make sure that we're bringing the body alongside in the trauma recovery process. Hence the creation of this podcast. My hope is to offer you short, accessible, practical, body-based tools that you can start integrating into your daily life, one episode at a time, until your nervous system care feels as natural as brushing your teeth every day. And if that sounds like something that you might be interested in, I'd love to invite you to like or subscribe on whatever platform you're currently watching or listening. All of those little clicks really do help other people find this content, and I am so grateful for that. And so speaking of things I am grateful for, we have also started a new segment of reading out some of our 5-star reviews and saying thank you to those people live on the podcast. So let me grab my phone here. So today's 5-star review is going to be from Sandy Flesner, and she titled it Practical and Insightful. She said, Christine is such a teacher, always sharing wisdom in such an approachable way. I love sharing her podcast with people because she's so practical and insightful. That is so encouraging, Sandy. I feel like my big goal with this podcast is I really want people to walk away with tools for their tool belt. I was actually having a conversation with a colleague just yesterday about how much I think somatic work, nervous system regulation, somatic training can even be preventative resource. We can have these little tools that we can use if things ever get hard. And so I love that what you're taking away from the podcast is that it's practical. So thank you so much for sharing. So if you have not yet written a review, I'd love to invite you to do so I can read yours on a future episode and tell you thank you. It only takes a minute. And like I said, it does help this podcast get to more listeners. Okay, so let's talk about rest and why for so many of us, it does not feel restful at all. So I want to start with something that Dr. Gabor Maté writes about in his book, When the Body Says No, which is that the inability to rest is almost never about personality. It is almost always about history. He describes how many high-capacity people, the ones who are always on, always producing, always available, they learned very early on that their worth was tied to what they were doing. So achieving was how they stayed safe. It was how they stayed loved and connected or relevant and needed. And so the body learned that moving, producing, going, doing, performing equals safety, connection, and love. And stillness, on the other hand, equals what exactly? Being invisible, being behind, not being enough, not having my people. Like, this is not a mindset problem. This is not something that you can think your way out of. It is a body memory that is deep within the attachment system. And as Dr. Bessel Kolk explains in The Body Keeps the Score, the nervous system that has been in chronic activation or that kind of go, go, go intensity mentality, it does not automatically downshift just because the external threat is gone. The body keeps the score, right? It stays in the pattern that it learned long after that original reason for the pattern has passed. And so what is actually happening in the physiology when rest feels unsafe? Well, thanks to Dr. Stephen Porges and Dr. Deb Dana and polyvagal theory, we understand that the nervous system has a hierarchy of states. And so at the top, we have, and I'll put a picture of this right here in the screen. At the top, we have ventral vagal, which is our safe, social, connected, resting place. Then underneath, we have our sympathetic activation, which is that fight and flight gear, that high volume, high vigilance. I'm mobilized for action. And then down here at the bottom, we have dorsal vagal, which is that kind of deep freeze and shutdown state. And so here's what's really important for today's episode. You know, when someone has spent years, sometimes decades, in this chronic sympathetic activation state, that ventral vagal state starts to feel foreign and not just like unfamiliar, but actually threatening. Because to the nervous system, dropping your vigilance feels like dropping your protection. And so then you get that threat signal inside. And so when you finally do sit down and your body starts to get quiet, your nervous system can misread that quieting as danger. You know, the quiet itself becomes the trigger. And then Dr. Peter Levine of somatic experiencing adds another layer to this work when he talks about how the nervous system regulates through what he calls pendulation, which is the natural rhythm of the nervous system moving through activation and settling, or sympathetic and parasympathetic. But when someone has been stuck in that like chronic stress kind of state or has experienced trauma, that pendulation gets wonky, right? It gets stuck. The system loses its capacity to kind of swing back and forth from intensity to settling, from activation to rest, because it hasn't experienced that rest side enough for it to feel safe. Like that pathway is not built. And so in other words, rest for a lot of people is a skill that has to be built. We have to teach the nervous system that this can actually be a safe place. You know, it makes me think about one of my students in the Somatic Wellness Collective recently told me, and just as a side note, just to kind of get a picture of who she is, she's like this high achieving, high capacity professional. She has kids at home. She loves her work. She's built this life that she loves, right? But what she was telling me about was that she noticed that every time she sat down, even if it was just for a couple moments in between meetings, she would just get flooded with guilt. Almost felt like this like weight on her chest of, okay, wait, I can't sit. I need to be going. I need to be doing. And so she had spent a lot of years interpreting that guilty pressure heaviness as a sign that she was just someone that didn't need a lot of downtime, right? Like, oh, I'm fine. I keep going. And so it wasn't until she started doing some of the nervous system practices that we do in SWC that she realized that that pressure in her chest was not a personality trait. It was a threat response. Her body had learned so deeply that rest meant falling behind or disappointing someone, which equals I might lose someone. And so when she did sit still, all of her survival circuitry was activated. So in other words, she wasn't someone who just didn't need rest. She was someone whose nervous system had never learned that rest was allowed. And when she understood that, she was able to gently start to invite rest back into her life. These are not overnight changes. When these are deeply entrenched patterns in the nervous system, especially when they're connected to our attachment system, which I think this one is, it is going to take time and consistent practice of showing your body that this thing, this rest, this pause, this stillness can be safe, which is why I said what I did at the beginning of the podcast when I was kind of introducing the idea of the podcast is my hope is that these practices become as normal as brushing your teeth. because that is the kind of thing that the nervous system is going to need, that kind of consistency and rhythm to actually make changes in this kind of deeply entrenched pattern. So speaking of the practice, let's jump into it. So it's 3 parts, and my hope is that it can kind of help you gently drift over into stillness and rest. So it's not like we're like jumping into rest, almost like think about it like a boat kind of out in the lake, and then the little waves kind of like eventually, gradually over time, push it over to the shore. It's kind of my image when I think about this practice. So if you have a moment to try with us now, you can, or if you're driving or at the gym or something, you can totally just listen and come back and try it later when you've got a moment. So the first thing we need to do is we need to work with the story, because before the body can rest, the belief that rest is dangerous needs somewhere to go, right? This is where Dr. Gabor Mate's work becomes so practical, because he would say that naming the story is the first act of releasing it. So I'd love for you to take a moment, maybe take a breath, and just ask yourself honestly, what is the story that I'm carrying around about rest or stillness? Maybe it sounds like, I don't deserve to rest until everything's done. Or if I slow down, something's going to fall apart, something's going to get missed. Whatever it is, I just want you to notice it. You don't have to fix it or argue with it or CBT it. I just want you to see it there. And then if you're open to it, I'd love to invite you to take your hands and just like you could place them somewhere, maybe on the table in front of you, maybe on the chair next to you, maybe even on your knees, whatever. But just notice what it's like for your hands to rest somewhere. Maybe feeling the temperature of what you're touching or the texture. What I'd love to invite you to do is as you breathe, when you do your exhale, I'd love to invite you to just imagine that that story, whatever it is, maybe the I don't deserve to rest till it's all done, whatever that story is, imagine it almost like with your exhale, like you're just like leaving it on the table or leaving it on the couch next to you. It's just like coming out through your hands and it's staying in that space. Almost like we're just setting it down for now. We're not throwing it away. We're just putting it down for the length of this practice. Of course, you can pick it back up later if that's what you need to do, but just for the next few moments together, we're going to put this story somewhere else. And so I'm going to do that with you now. So just on the exhale, kind of letting that story give it a place to go. Yeah. And take as much time as you need there whenever you feel like you've kind of let it go, at least in some way. Just noticing inside how you know that. I noticed my shoulders dropped, my gut kind of released a little. So just almost like you're tagging inside. This is what it's like to let this go for a moment. You can always pause the podcast here if you need a little bit more time. And if not, we can go ahead and transition together to part 2. We're going to be a little creative here. Dr. Kolk talks extensively about how rhythm is one of the most regulating inputs available to the human nervous system. And obviously, we just talked about Peter Levine's concept of pendulation. The nervous system doesn't leap from activation into rest. It almost like sways. If you're familiar with pendulation, you know it's represented by the infinity symbol. And so whenever I think about pendulation, I think about kind of this movement, right? And so instead of asking your body to just arrive at stillness, I would actually like to use rhythm as a bridge to stillness. So if you're open to it, I'd love to invite you to kind of just start a little easy sway. And so if you're seated, you could kind of do what I'm doing here, swaying from side to side or forward to back, whatever feels better to you. You can even play with it a little and just see how it feels. Do the same if you're standing. If you're laying down, you might could prop your knees up and let your knees kind of sway from side to side. Almost imagining, like, as far as the pace of the sway, almost imagining what you would do if you were holding a sleeping baby and you didn't want them to wake up. That's kind of what I'm imagining here. So just find your own rhythm here. And then I'd love to invite you to kind of just let your breath sync up with that movement. So, inhale as you go to the right, exhale as you go to the left. Not like forcing it, but just this little kind of connection of breath to the rhythm that your body's doing. And it might feel a little silly. That's okay. So just notice what starts to happen. Maybe your jaw softens, maybe your shoulders drop, maybe your stomach unclenches, maybe your breath has a little bit more room. And so you can stay with this rocking as long as you need, as long as feels right. And then whenever you're ready, I'd love to invite you to slowly let the rocking become smaller. And so you can see, like right now, I've got a pretty good sway going, right? Like as far as distance my body is traveling. And so I want to invite you to just like make it a little smaller, like maybe come in a couple inches and notice what happens. And there may be a little activation. I noticed a little drop in my stomach, changing it up. And so just let that hang for a moment until it feels okay. And then whenever it feels right, you can make it even a little smaller until it feels like it's ready to kind of stop on its own. You can take as much time here as you need. Feel free to pause the podcast and then just notice what it's like to be still. And so this last part comes from Pat Ogden's work, and it's something I think about often when I think about rest. It's really shifted how I view rest because she makes a distinction between what we might call a more kind of collapsed rest, which is that kind of like like slumping, kind of falling into the couch versus this more dignified rest. And the difference really matters because I think that kind of collapse rest can feel a lot more like, okay, I just went until I was so exhausted, I had to stop. Dignified rest feels like a choice. It's like upright, but soft. It's like not defeat. There's autonomy there. I'm choosing to be supported, with my spine, with the chair, all of that. But I'm also choosing to kind of rest into it. And so love to invite you to that now. So see if you can just like play with that idea of getting a little bit more length in your spine. I don't want you to like be like, "Whoop," because like that's so much tension to do that. But just like becoming gently a little bit more taller, almost like someone places a hand on your head and just like lifts you up barely, right? Let your shoulders kind of be open. Let your hands kind of rest wherever they want to. And once you feel like you found that place of dignified rest, just breathe here for a moment. Just notice what it's like to be present in this kind of upright but soft place. Notice what it's like. Like, I'm not doing anything right now. I'm not performing. No one's expecting anything from me. Just here in a body that's resting. And even if you don't believe it yet, what I want to say to you is that you're allowed to be here. It's okay to be here. It's okay to rest. It's okay to slow down for just a moment. So if it feels okay, I'd love to invite you to one final breath here. Inhale through the nose, exhale through the mouth, maybe letting that exhale be a little longer than the inhale. It feels very calm to me. It's wonderful. I hope it's felt supportive for you as well. What I'd love to encourage you with here is, start small with this practice, maybe once a day or once every other day, just for a couple of moments, really allowing yourself to slowly move into stillness, titrate your way over into rest. And if you find yourself wanting to go deeper into this work, not just understand tools for your toolbox, but maybe the patterns like underneath them in your story and your nervous system, that's exactly what we do inside the Somatic Wellness Collective. So this month in SWC, we're spending real time with this exact pattern. And so if you're curious what that community looks like, the link is in the show notes below. So thank you so much for being here today. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe before you go. And in closing, remember, your body has innate wisdom. All we have to do is learn how to listen to it. And that's what I'm here for. I'll see you next week.